This successful investigation boasts the largest methamphetamine seizure in Colorado history.
At 4:20 a.m., federal tactical teams simultaneously moved across several American states, entering apartments, offices, and warehouses that had appeared completely normal just hours earlier. Agents from the FBI, ICE, HSI, and armed federal units seized fentanyl powder, fake pills, cocaine, methamphetamine, firearms, and large amounts of cash in an operation carried out with speed and precision. These were not random arrests or routine drug stops, but carefully chosen locations tied to a criminal system that had been operating quietly for years inside legal businesses. What made the strike disturbing was not only the scale of the seizures, but how easily these drugs and weapons had been hidden behind clean paperwork and everyday routines. This report follows the investigation step by step, from the first small crack in the system to the moment federal authorities decided it was time to shut it down. The morning on Interstate 40 opened quietly, with pale light spreading across the asphalt and long-haul trucks rolling through the corridor as they did every day, steady and unremarkable. Engines held a constant rhythm, tires whispered against the road, and the air carried no sense of danger, only routine. This stretch of highway had seen countless inspections before, and drivers passing through expected nothing more than a brief delay before continuing toward distant warehouses and cities. In that calm, a white tractor trailer marked with the North Star Freight Group logo moved into position without drawing attention, its speed controlled, its signals clean, and its presence blending naturally into the stream of traffic. The stop itself unfolded without tension, with officers moving through familiar motions that came from repetition rather than urgency. The driver exited the cab slowly, his hands visible, his expression neutral, and his posture suggested experience rather than fear. Documents were handed over in neat order, each page aligned, stamped, and approved through systems designed to protect legitimate commerce. The cargo manifest listed household furniture, boxed and secured for long-distance transport, and every declared detail matched federal standards. There was no raised voice, no sharp command, and no hint of confrontation, only a quiet exchange shaped by procedure. From the outside, the truck resembled thousands of others that traversed the country each day, backed by clean audits and a company name associated with reliability. North Star Freight Group trucks moved constantly across state lines, delivering goods that filled homes, offices, and stores. Their reputation helped them pass through inspections with ease. The declared weight cleared the first check, the route aligned with approved schedules, and the driver's calm manner reinforced the appearance of legitimacy. Nothing in the early moments demanded urgency, yet routine inspections exist for a reason, because experience teaches that danger often hides where nothing seems wrong. When the trailer rolled fully onto the scale, the reading stabilized quickly, but the physical behavior of the vehicle told a quieter story. The weight leaned slightly to one side, subtle enough to escape casual notice, yet distinct to trained eyes that read machines the way others read faces. The suspension pressed unevenly, and the balance suggested density rather than volume, as if something solid rested beneath softer layers. This detail slowed the process, turning a routine check into a careful pause, where attention shifted from paperwork to physical reality. Officers moved toward the rear doors and opened the trailer, revealing tightly packed rows of boxed furniture stacked with professional care. Each item was wrapped, labeled, and secured to prevent damage, creating the impression of a shipment prepared by people who understood logistics and efficiency. The space smelled of cardboard and plastic, and the air inside held the stillness of a sealed cargo hold. Everything appeared in order, yet as inspectors progressed inward, the depth of the trailer began to feel wrong, as though the space extended beyond its expected limit. At the far end, behind the final line of boxes, a concealed partition blended seamlessly into the trailer's structure. It was built flush with the walls, reinforced to appear functional rather than deceptive, and designed to survive repeated use without drawing suspicion. This was not a loose panel or a rushed alteration, but a feature intentionally integrated. When the compartment was opened, the scene shifted sharply from ordinary freight to organized crime, exposing tightly wrapped bricks stacked with exact precision. Inside lay 270 kilograms of cocaine, compressed, sealed, and arranged for stability rather than concealment. Each package was uniform in size and weight, wrapped to protect against moisture and movement, showing care and planning that spoke of experience. This quantity was not meant for a single transaction or a limited market, but for distribution on a scale that could affect multiple regions. The compartment exhibited signs of a long-term use, with marks and wear that indicated it had previously carried similar loads, opening and closing as part of a repeated process. The discovery changed the meaning of every earlier detail, reframing calm behavior and clean paperwork as protective layers rather than proof of innocence. Individuals acting alone do not build compartments like this, and they do not move such quantities without confidence in a system that has succeeded before. The driver's composure now reflected routine participation rather than chance, shaped by trust in schedules and approvals that had worked many times. This was not a gamble taken on impulse, but a step within a larger machine designed to move without disruption. As evidence was secured, the focus expanded beyond the shoulder of Interstate 40, reaching outward into the paths this truck had traveled before. Routes were reviewed alongside other North Star movements, revealing repetition instead of deviation. The same highways appeared again and again, the same time windows repeated week after week, and the same stops aligned across different shipments. What emerged was a pattern shaped by rhythm, where movement followed predictable cycles that blended perfectly into commercial flow. Each additional record strengthened the picture of coordination, showing that this truck was not unique, but one component within a broader structure. More than 300 vehicles operated under similar schedules, supported by around 60 drivers who understood the nature of what they carried. Nearly 20 warehouses across 11 states appeared in logs as transfer points, handling legal goods by day while quietly supporting illegal movement beyond public view. These locations functioned as ordinary facilities, avoiding the behaviors typically associated with criminal sites and instead relying on familiarity and trust. The I-40 stop no longer stood as an isolated success, but as the first visible fracture in a system that had relied on invisibility. The highway continued to function as usual. Traffic flowed uninterrupted, and most drivers remained unaware of what had been uncovered. Yet behind that normal surface, understanding shifted, revealing that ordinary routes had been carrying extraordinary risk. This moment marked the transition from a single seizure to the recognition of a national structure operating within plain sight. If a shipment like this could move so quietly through routine inspections until that moment, then countless others had likely done the same across neighborhoods and towns that trusted the steady movement of commerce. That realization raises a simple yet profound question. If this truck had passed your street without pause, would you have seen danger or only another delivery on the road? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the next section reveals how this single stop opened the door to a network stretching far beyond one highway. Movement defined everything once the highway seizure exposed how cargo truly traveled, because the danger was never fixed in one place, but carried forward by schedules that never changed. Trucks left warehouses on the same mornings each week, engines turning over before dawn, headlights cutting through darkness as drivers followed routes they already knew by memory. The timing was steady and predictable, neither rushed nor delayed and never irregular, which allowed the shipments to blend into traffic without friction. This rhythm gave the illusion of safety, because nothing that moves on time ever looks suspicious. Inside that rhythm, cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl traveled as quietly as furniture and appliances. Each route was repeated with precision, as if the highway itself expected these vehicles to appear at certain hours. Drivers passed checkpoints during familiar windows, rolled through way stations without hesitation, and reached transfer points according to schedules that rarely shifted. There was no improvisation, no sudden turns, and no erratic movement, only steady progress shaped by expectation. The sameness protected them, because officers trained to notice change rarely stop what never changes. What appeared dull from the outside was, in fact, deliberate, built to blend into the background of daily commerce. Warehouses supporting this movement stood in plain sight, surrounded by regular traffic, with loading docks active and bustling with forklifts and workers during daylight hours. Pallets of legal goods moved in and out, invoices were stamped, and doors opened and closed on time, creating a picture of ordinary business. Cameras recorded routine activity, alarms remained silent, and nothing suggested urgency or secrecy. Yet when evening arrived, the environment shifted without noise, as legal work gave way to another function hidden behind the same walls. The same docks that handled furniture now handled narcotics with equal care. Inside these spaces, drugs were not treated as something dangerous or illicit, but as cargo requiring careful handling. Packages were weighed, sealed, and stacked to prevent movement, using methods designed for long-distance transport. Workers moved with practiced calmness, lifting and placing items according to procedure rather than out of fear. Cocaine bricks rested beside legitimate freight, indistinguishable in form if not in consequence. Methamphetamine and fentanyl followed the same rules, processed efficiently and quietly to avoid mistakes. Fentanyl carried the greatest urgency because once it left the warehouse, time became a weapon. A single shipment could reach multiple cities within 48 hours, passing through distribution points before any alarm reached the surface. The substance required no large volume to cause widespread harm, and its integration into regular freight erased the boundaries that once slowed its spread. Each hour that passed allowed it to sink deeper into communities far from the highways that carried it. This speed transformed routine delivery into a silent escalation. As movement patterns became clearer, attention shifted toward the source of direction, because routes this precise do not organize themselves. Drivers followed paths assigned to them, not chosen on instinct, and warehouses released loads only when the necessary approvals were in place. No decision appeared spontaneous, and no deviation went unexplained. Control flowed from above, guiding movement without appearing on the road or inside the cargo space. This distance protected leadership, keeping them removed from the physical risk while maintaining authority over every shipment. At the center of this structure sat an executive role shaped by spreadsheets rather than street presence. The individual responsible did not touch drugs, did not ride in trucks, and did not stand inside warehouses at night. Instead, his influence moved through approvals, schedules, and efficiency targets that shaped every route. Each sensitive shipment passed through this layer of authorization, disguised as operational planning rather than criminal direction. The absence of explicit orders created insulation, allowing leadership to claim distance from outcomes. This form of control relied on professional language and business logic, transforming illegal movement into a matter of performance and efficiency. Routes were evaluated for speed and cost, drivers were selected for reliability, and schedules were adjusted to maximize output. These decisions appeared normal on paper, framed as logistics optimization rather than evidence of criminal intent. Yet each approval pushed drugs further along their path, carrying consequences that never appeared on balance sheets. The system rewarded smooth operation, not ethical awareness. What made this structure exceptionally resilient was its lack of visible violence, because fear was replaced by routine. Participants followed procedures rather than commands, reducing the need for threats or force. Success reinforced trust, encouraging continued cooperation without confrontation. Losses were absorbed quietly, treated as inefficiencies rather than failures, allowing the system to adjust without panic. This calm authority proved more decisive than street-level control because it did not draw attention. The network that emerged resembled a corporate distribution system more than a gang territory, stretching across state lines without conflict. Drugs moved smoothly until they left controlled channels and entered communities where violence and harm appeared downstream. This separation shielded leadership from direct exposure to consequences, placing damage at a distance. By the time substances reached the streets, control had already passed through multiple layers, each one designed to look legitimate. The harm was real, but its origin remained hidden. Understanding this method forced investigators to confront a different kind of threat, one rooted in trust rather than force. When illegal goods travel through systems people rely on every day, detection becomes difficult and the impact becomes wide. The network exploited confidence in legal commerce, using infrastructure built for efficiency as cover. Each successful shipment strengthened the belief in the process, making intervention more difficult. The danger lay not only in the drugs themselves, but in how seamlessly they blended into accepted flow. This realization changed the direction of the pursuit, because stopping individual trucks would never end the movement. Attention turned toward dismantling control rather than chasing cargo, recognizing that direction mattered more than volume. Every approval traced back to the same source, revealing how deeply criminal intent had been woven into management. The focus narrowed, shifting from highways to decision-making desks where routes were born. This shift marked the moment when investigators understood the scale of action required. The system did not collapse on its own, and it would not stop without pressure applied everywhere at once. Each layer depended on the one below it, forming a structure that could absorb disruption unless its center was compromised. The realization brought urgency, because delay allowed continued movement, and movement allowed harm to occur. Plans began to form that matched the scale of the network, recognizing that anything smaller would fail. The stage was set for an operation designed to strike across multiple states simultaneously, targeting control rather than cargo. That decision led directly into the coordinated federal action that follows in the next section. For 18 months after the highway seizure, the network continued to operate, and federal teams allowed it to do so, monitoring every shift and adjustment without intervening. Trucks still rolled before dawn, warehouses still opened and closed on time, and drivers followed routes that had already been memorized. This restraint was not hesitation, but a strategy, because the system had already demonstrated its ability to adapt when touched too early. Minor disruptions caused movement to reroute, responsibilities to shift, and activity to resume elsewhere without pause. Acting too soon would have only warned the machine that it was being watched. During this extended period, pressure built quietly as agents monitored how the network responded to subtle stress. When one vehicle vanished from records, another appeared to replace it within days, filling the gap without confusion. When a warehouse's activity slowed, volume shifted to another location with no visible strain. These changes were smooth and deliberate, not frantic, revealing a structure designed to absorb loss rather than collapse. Every adjustment confirmed the same truth, that the network could survive piecemeal attacks and required a different kind of strike. As weeks turned into months, repetition began to work against the system itself. Routes overlapped more frequently. Schedules were too tightly aligned, and drivers crossed paths with increasing frequency. What once looked flexible began to feel compressed as options narrowed and escape paths repeated. Warehouses appeared repeatedly in logs, tying movement to specific locations that could no longer be rotated without disruption. The system still functioned, but its ability to avoid attention slowly weakened under its own consistency. Federal planners waited for the moment when movement could no longer shift without exposure. That moment arrived quietly, marked by the realization that every sensitive route depended on the same approvals and timing windows. If those approvals were to vanish, movement would stall everywhere at once. This understanding shaped the final plan, which focused on timing rather than force. The goal was not confrontation, but silence, denying the system any chance to react. The operation was named Iron Current because it was designed to surge through every layer simultaneously. The chosen hour came before sunrise, when drivers were asleep or already committed to routes they could not abandon. At that time, teams across 15 states moved together, stepping into position without sirens or announcements. Warehouses, offices, and private homes were entered with precision, having been meticulously prepared over months. The absence of warning ensured that no message could travel faster than the arrests themselves. Inside warehouses, the change was immediate and absolute. Pallets were pulled apart, hidden compartments exposed, and packages opened under bright lights that replaced the darkness of night operations. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl appeared in volumes that reflected years of movement rather than recent activity. Paperwork that once justified efficiency now sat meaningless, stripped of authority. The spaces that had quietly processed illegal cargo were frozen mid-function, their routine broken without a sound. In offices tied to scheduling and approvals, screens went dark as agents secured computers and records. Phones remained unanswered, calendars lost their power, and the steady rhythm of decision-making stopped instantly. These rooms had never seen drugs, but they had controlled where drugs went, and now they stood silent. The separation that once protected leadership vanished, replaced by stillness that revealed how much control had flowed through these desks. Authority disappeared the moment access was removed. At private residences, arrests unfolded before daily routines could begin. Individuals connected to the network were taken into custody in kitchens and bedrooms, removed before they could reach phones or send warnings. There were no chases, no resistance, and no raised voices because surprise was held. The lack of chaos was the most unambiguous indication that the strike had been successful. Silence meant the system had been caught intact. On highways far from the initial raids, the effects spread as trucks already in motion were stopped at rest areas and checkpoints. Drivers were separated from vehicles, searched, and detained without pursuit. Engines cooled as schedules lost meaning, and movement stalled where it stood. Without direction from above, there was no reason to continue, and no authority to justify deviation. Motion gave way to uncertainty across multiple corridors. By the time daylight returned, the scale of Iron Current became visible. 61 drivers and managers were in custody, removed from a structure that could no longer function. Cash was counted in stacks rather than bills, narcotics were weighed in bulk rather than packaged, and evidence-filled, secure rooms were once used for coordination. The volume reflected planning and consistency, not luck. It revealed how deeply the system had become embedded before being exposed. As communication channels went quiet, failure spread rapidly through the network. Trucks sat idle in yards, waiting for instructions that never arrived. Warehouse doors remained shut, shifts canceled, and loading docks empty. Digital schedules disappeared, approvals froze, and automated processes stalled without oversight. What had once moved with certainty now stopped completely, unable to act without guidance. This paralysis revealed the system's true weakness. Every part depended on centralized control, and without it, nothing could move. Drivers could not reroute, warehouses could not release loads, and managers could not adjust timing. Unlike street gangs that fragment and fight under pressure, this network collapsed inward, losing coherence when leadership vanished. Its strength during operation became its failure during disruption. The collapse showed that survival had relied on coordination, not independence. Redundancy, once a shield, became a trap when no one remained to direct it. The system did not resist or scatter because it had been built to follow orders, not improvise. Within hours, a national flow of illegal cargo fell silent. Iron Current succeeded because it struck every critical point at once, denying time and space for recovery. The network fell not because of one arrest or one raid, but because control itself was removed. Empty schedules and silent facilities marked the end of a structure that could not exist without centralized direction. What remained was evidence of a machine stopped mid-motion. As detainees were processed and sites secured, attention shifted forward, recognizing that dismantling one system does not erase the methods that built it. What began as a routine traffic stop on a federal highway ended with the exposure of a criminal network that spanned multiple states and industries, illustrating how easily a national system can be exploited against the public. One truck on Interstate 40 revealed not a lone smuggler, but a coordinated operation built on schedules, approvals, and trust in legal commerce. The case showed that modern crime no longer hides in dark alleys or involves sudden violence, but instead operates through paperwork, delivery windows, and companies that appear clean on the surface. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl moved quietly inside this flow, protected by routines designed for efficiency rather than safety, and carried into communities far from the highways where they traveled. From that moment, investigators understood they were not chasing loads, but confronting a system that had learned how to survive without noise or fear. If logistics networks continue to be exploited, similar structures may still be operating elsewhere, hidden inside companies that appear ordinary and compliant. Each successful shipment builds confidence, delays detection, and allows harm to spread before alarms ever sound. This reality suggests federal agencies will be forced to intervene earlier, strike broader, and focus on control points rather than street-level arrests. Waiting for violence to appear gives these systems time to harden, adapt, and disappear again. This story is not only about drugs or arrests, but about trust and how easily it can be abused in plain sight. Subscribe to Military Power and ask which threat scares you more.